So let's look at adding negative numbers again. Let's look at adding negative, kind of a part two to adding negative numbers. Because when you look at it, sometimes you're not always going to have a number line. You're going to have to be able to figure out how to add negative numbers even when you don't have a number line. When you look at a problem like this, we already know from our previous exercise and previous video that when you add a negative, it's the same thing as subtracting a positive. So 1 plus negative 2 is the same as 1 minus 2. When I look at this, if I had to just look at this straightforwardly, I would look at this and I would be able to say, I'm going to look at the absolute value of negative 2. And I know that the absolute value of negative 2 is greater than the absolute value of 1. So essentially 2 is greater than 1 from an absolute value perspective. And I know that when I find the difference between this, which is just the answer to a subtraction problem, because this is what this essentially is a subtraction problem, I know I'm going to carry over the sign of the greater number, the number that has the greater absolute value. So this is going to be a negative 1. The answer is going to be negative because 2 has a greater absolute value than 1. Let's look at this again. Let's look at this another way, a couple of examples. If I have 4 plus negative 3, essentially what that is, this is a subtraction problem. That's the same thing as 4 minus 3, and it's going to be equal to 1. 4 is greater than 3, and the answer is going to be positive. So this is the same thing as 4 minus 3, and I'm just finding the difference between these two numbers. When you find the answer to a subtraction problem, you're finding the difference. So this is how you do it. So let's take a look at another one. Let's say I have 4 plus negative 23. I automatically know this is going to be a subtraction problem. This is the same thing as 4 minus 23. And 23 has a greater absolute value, so the answer is going to be negative. So it's going to be negative 19. 4 minus 23 is going to be negative 19. And once again, I'm just finding the difference between 23 and 4. That's what a subtraction problem is. You're finding the difference between those two numbers. So 4 minus 23 is going to be negative 19. Let's take a look at this one last problem. Let's say I have 8 plus negative 6. Now, already off the bat, the 8 has a higher absolute value, right? It's higher from an absolute value standpoint. And I'm going to find the difference here. This is the same thing as 8 minus 6. And so the answer to this is going to be 2. So sometimes you're going to be in a situation where you're not going to have a number line. You're going to have to figure out the answer to some of these problems on your own. And this is one way to do it.